Good evening and welcome to a fans special on the Magpie Circle podcast. I think it's the penultimate one before Christmas, not exactly sure. We'll be discussing who we want for Christmas with our January sales on January the 1st. But thought tonight we would throw it open to some of the members of our long-suffering flock, and in the two cases we've got tonight, long travelling, opposite ends of the country, from the northeast and from, I guess you'd say, the southwest. Welcome to Craig Smith, alias the Big Picture House for some wonderful reason. Craig, welcome from Newcastle, where you and your sprightly father are known to make, what, a 400-mile round journey?
About 370, I think it is.
Is that all?
Oh, yeah, that's what I charge him for the petrol money anyway. So,
you made him. He's 88. You made him go all the way there and back to Wembley on the same day. You didn't even put him up at the Wembley Hilton. Can't believe it. Can't believe it. And Joe, opposite end of the country. How long's your journey, Joe? And you're down. Is Yeovil your nearest port of call?
Yeah, we're in Dorchester, so Yeovil is the closest, which we went to every season until this season, and Weymouth actually, couple seasons back, that was the closest. That's sort of on our doorstep. Other than that, to Nottingham, it's about a 400-mile round trip. So we make a pilgrimage there every so often, but we tend to do a lot of the away matches around London and the southwest, which there's not many of actually in League Two.
There's a lot of places
to give us some more away matches.
Hey, there's a lot of places in the National League I'm glad I'm not going to. Dover principal, but I've got to say Yeovil is up there for the most inaccessible ground imaginable. And even when you go on the train, which I like to do, it's still 5 miles from the nearest Reading railway station. So you have to get a taxi there. Unbelievable place. But anyway, as it's a fan show tonight, and obviously this is, as always, an online social media content creator numpty-free zone. I know we've got a few of them. Let's read out some thoughts tonight. Respectful debate and discussion at all times, please. Let's get some thoughts and views on the message boards. David Dawes, evening all. Hope Luke Williams got some plans to change our defending. Jurgen Halligan disappointed with the second half. Poor performance and don't understand the substitutions. Hi from North Wales, says Neil Walker. Royston says Twitter exploding over the weekend. Evening from Paul Huskisson. Jurgen says case of hanging on until next month and strengthening the defence. Royston, they had a full week to sort the Shrewsbury debacle out, and what did we get? Something even worse. Chris Gosling really disappointed. We threw away the FA Cup for that performance. George Hilton, too slow. Alex Jackson, evening, need to get the cohesion back. Team were flat. Fans as well, never sparked on Saturday. Derek Flowers, ease up, lads. We're only 1 point off second. Could be worse. Royston adds Harrogate will be licking their lips come Saturday. Jurgen adds need to get the ball quicker to Langstaff. Ian G, we could be in for a hiding at Stockport. They ain't winning too many at the moment. If we don't sort something out ASAP, they will be well versed on how we play. George Hilton, too slow in defence. Teams are catching on to how Notts play and can deal with us. Shane Walker, evening for a nice and calm Leon Solent. We are Wrexham. We have quite a few Wrexham fans, and do you know what? Despite the social media meltdown, all very respectful on here. 1 point off second before adjusting for games in hand, with a tough Stockport match coming up. A few more bad results, and you're on the border of playoff spots, he says. James Moore, evening, folks. How bad do we need a new keeper? Good luck on the show. Joe says some geezer called Alan Cotty might be relevant. Pythagorean, evening all. Will Tiernan get his chance in goal? James Moore, all things in perspective. If we had won Saturday, we would have been second. Chris Gosling can't see it. James, after either three senior keepers in the squad. Craig, right now, both of you make very long pilgrimages. I think that was the word you used earlier, Joe. Can't say it. And journeys from all parts of the country. Craig, so you're up and down from Newcastle, trains, planes, automobiles, or whatever. Tell me where you are in terms of this scale, because depending how you want to present things, we've got the second worst defence in the league. I think it still is, which equates to being relegation fall. Conceded far too many goals, lost a few at home recently, but not been out the playoffs. Not been out the playoff spot since probably, I don't know, week 3, whenever it was we got back in them after the defeat at Sutton. So where are you in this big debate?
I'm personally, I'm an eternal optimist, which probably doesn't really fit very well with being a not supporter. But I do think we have to sort of remind ourselves every now and again how far we've come in this space of time. You know, I think a lot of people at the beginning of the season were saying, oh, you know, if we stay up, that'll be great. And then after Sutton, that seemed quite a reasonable expectation to be a season, a success over the season. But I think as we've gone on, we've had that amazing run. We got ourselves up into the playoff spots. And I think now we've set such a high level for ourselves, you know, in League Two, that I think, you know, sometimes I think we just forget how far we've come in a relative short space of time. I mean, you look at the lads that we've got on our team, you know, Langstaff, Kyle Cameron. It's the first time they've played for extended periods in the Football League. And I think we've been a bit surprised by the gulf. I thought we were all last season saying, oh, it's not that different. You know, well, the difference between National League and the top of the National League and the bottom of League Two isn't that much. Well, I don't think it is. But I think at the top, I think we're finding, you know, there's some of those teams that are, we thought we'd walk all over, you know, have got more quality than we thought. So I think it's very fine margins. You know, again, somebody mentioned on the stream here that, you know, if we'd won on Saturday, we'd been second. I was watching the highlights again. You know, if Dan Crowley's shot, the keeper made a great save. We've gone to 2-0. I think it was just as soon as they got that equaliser on Saturday, you could see we just became really, really nervous. And I think the momentum just shifted. And I think, you know, I know people have commented about the substitutions. So I think sort of Saturday was a bit of a microcosm of what's gone on over the season. You know, we've kind of sort of led ourselves to think that that's what we should expect, and that we're going to kind of, you know, win the game and win and get what we want this season. But it's harder than we think. And I think we're starting to doubt ourselves a little bit on the pitch, which worries me. And I don't think, you know, some of the noises coming from the crowd on Saturday, I was a bit, I don't know, I was just a bit uneasy with, particularly a bit of the booing that was going on towards the end. It just didn't feel right. It didn't feel appropriate. I know we pay our money, we take our choice, but that's what it felt like to me.
Now then, so Alcazar 35, I believe.
That's me,
Craig,
Dad.
your dad,
Yeah.
isn't it? Yeah. Now you didn't tell him you were coming on, did you?
No,
and
I
you
didn't.
said
I
to me,
thought
"Hey,
it
you
surprised you."
keel over with the shock." Well, he's been on the message boards, which I think at 88, you know, is pretty good knowledge of new technology. What a trip, your dad says. My son's car shifted more water than an ocean liner. The trip back seemed more like 300 than 171. But we will all be back on Boxing Day. Joe, so tell me, what makes you, and because we met, didn't we, with your dad, you were buying a copy of everybody's Christmas present, the Magpie Redemption, extra print runs, £15 plus P&P, either from the shop direct or from my direct eBay store. So I saw you and your dad there. What makes you do this pilgrimage, you know, from Dorchester? Because it's not even like a straight motorway or anything. Am I right in thinking the Cotties are quite a long-serving Notts County supporting family?
They are, yeah. It's I suppose it's part of a bit of history, really. My dad was, because obviously we're in Dorset now, so I've never lived in Nottingham. My dad is from Nottingham. He's a Hucknall lad, actually, and so obviously my nana and his dad, my granddad, who I never met, they're from Nottingham. My dad's always been a supporter since he was a young lad, and my granddad was as well. So it kind of goes back, and I think it's that kind of sense of family ties is what makes me want to keep supporting. And once you're in, you're in. You can't get out. You're always going to be a supporter. And for me, it's that it's more than just watching football. It's more than just following a team that I like. It's about the family connections and roots and maintaining that link to Nottingham. And I mean, there's highs and lows, as there is with every football club that you support. But for me, it's the highs that far outweigh any lows that it brings, or any frustration and difficult times. Those kind of highs really make it all worth it. I mean, those memories from promotion are something that, you can never replace that, no matter what is happening now or no matter what will happen in the future. We had such special memories of last season. Even created I don't know if you can see it, a collage in the background there for my dad, which documents our season as travelling supporters all the way to Wembley. And it's those special memories that you just can't replace. That makes me want to continue and travelling. I'll travel to wherever I need to go to see them and keep going with the support.
So to put this into context, for Saturday, for a Saturday game, what time would you leave Dorchester on average, and what time would you normally get back to Dorchester? Or do you make a weekend of it with family?
It depends where it is. If it's a local one, if it's something like we went to Torquay last couple of seasons.
So it's a home game to Nottingham.
To a home game. Actually, this season we went to watch Wrexham. Thought that would be a good one to go and see. It's where we bought your book. That we left on the Friday night. We made a whole weekend of it. So we went on Friday, stayed with some friends, and came back on Sunday. So it's quite an excursion, a bit tricky to do. Although last year I was living in London, so from London it's quite an easy journey up on the train. So we did that last season to watch Roy King, and there and back in a day. It's really easy. So yeah, those kind of distances.
Yeah, and look, this is not nuts. This is football, irrespective of division, of Premier League, National League. The pilgrimages and the travelling that supporters make is absolutely huge, and is not entirely unique to English football, British football, but nevertheless, Germany apart, there aren't, in Spain and Italy, they don't travel distances for away games. It's something quite peculiar to England and one or two other places. Let's just get a few more thoughts, and I knew this would crop up on the goalkeeping situation, but let's just get a few more thoughts. There is, when you come on the show, Craig, there is no hiding place. James Moore says he is checking out your vintage Star Wars figures behind him. So I tell you, my eyes, I wouldn't know what it was. But anyway, there you go. Oh, hang on a minute. What's this? Chewy batter, is it, or something? I don't know.
There you go. Bounty hunters.
Very, very good. Very good. How long do you think, Craig, from having watched this season, can we carry on still leaking goals and staying in the playoffs? Or do you think you reach a point whereby we start slipping out of the playoffs, or we have to significantly reduce the number of goals we're leaking? Because at the minute we're getting by. Depending which way you play the stats, I think it's something like we've won 2 of the last 6, won 4, lost 4 of the last 8, and I'm talking league games only.
No, I think it. I mean, I think it's got. We've got to stop shipping goals without a shadow of a doubt. And I think Saturday was, again, it was that they only scored 2, but we only scored 1. It's stating the obvious. I think we just couldn't. I don't think we created many chances in the sort of latter stages of the second half. But we've got to stop shipping goals. And I was looking at. I mean, I didn't get the one. We didn't go to the Shrewsbury match lightweights that we were, because it was a Friday night and I didn't fancy the weather. But I think when you look at a lot, when I never played football to any decent level, just as schoolboy, but you're always told last player, don't take any risks. And we just they seem to be the sort of mistakes that we're trying to do, step overs and fancy things. I know the first one was a slip, but for me, we've got to kind of just do some of the basic stuff better at the back, and whether that's with the personnel we've got or whether things need to change, I don't know. I don't like to criticize individual players. I know some players, you know, kind of seem to take the brunt of it, but you know, but it just seems to be lapses of concentration or just trying to do something too complicated when simple pass back to the keeper or, you know, put it into a safe space. And the distribution from the back, I think, you know, I'm not criticizing individuals, but both keepers seem to struggle. You know, you kind of think, just put it into a place where we can create danger, and it either just seems to go to touch or one of their players. And we haven't got the height up front to, you know, Didsey was struggling on Saturday. Normally seems to be the only one who can connect with long kicks. So, I mean, I think we've definitely got to tighten up at the back though. And I think it's partly experience. It's partly just not overcomplicating things at the back. And I know people moan about us tapping it around at the back and not getting it forward quick enough, but you know, it paid us well last season. You know, look at the Boreham Wood game. If we'd gone long and gone punting it into the box in that game, we would have lost 2-1, and we stuck to our principles. And I think we've got to kind of do that. But I think Luke, you know, I'm sure he's a very good guy, very, very clever guy. I'm sure he's working on that. But yeah, we've got to tighten up at the back without a shadow of a doubt. And if that needs new personnel, then I think you know, the manager, Luke, everybody's starting to kind of lean into that, I think, now.
Dale Pikett on the subject of away fans. Last season, I went to a Serie C game. That's the third tier in Italian football. There were 7 away fans in the ground and 4 were Englishmen. I'm guessing you were one of them. And we also watched Juventus versus Genoa 2. Chris Gosling says, we're lost without Palmer. No one had the confidence to get on the ball and play forward. So the ball kept ending up the back at Stones' feet. 2 defenders needed in January, midfielder and another option up front. Colin Scott, Kedwin's dad, Northeast Magpies currently lost their mojo too. Trippier cost us 4 goals lately, but he hasn't become a bad player. Now, you dipped in and out there, Joe. One thing I want to ask you, because you mentioned this to me this afternoon, because we had a lot of people wanting to join us tonight. Apologies. Those that have applied, we'll also make sure we can get you on when we do another of these supporters specials. But one I thought was, and I'm trying to get a bit of levity here, because I don't want to be too serious all the time. It's serious enough on a Saturday and a Saturday night recovering. So I went to Wimbledon, don't know whether Craig did, and we sold out. And I thought it was bad enough at times watching it from the Cherry Records Valley Stadium, or whatever it's called. Now, were you telling me you were watching, or well, you were keeping in touch, shall we say, from faraway climes? Tell me about that.
Indeed, yeah, I was in the middle of the desert in Senegal, and still managed to listen to some of the Knots commentary. You wouldn't believe they have great signal out there in a desert. So I was sort of bargaining with me and my dad, who can listen to a few minutes here and who can listen to these few minutes. So I got the last few minutes, and then Dad got the extra time, where I think we finally then lost. So we were sort of bargaining with who can listen to bits of. So
what's this, listening on your phone?
Yeah.
In the desert.
In the desert, yeah. Only lets you have one listener at a time on the iFollow. So we were sort of sharing the commentary. So I was in the middle of the desert, about to go on a camel, camping out there in the middle of nowhere, but still managed to listen to the Knots commentary and share a bit of wisdom with the other campers as well about it.
I've got to say, I've just got this sort of like vision of you in a Bedouin tent, a herd of camels, and sort of crouched over this little phone trying to work out, damn, El Hamadi scored again, you know.
Yeah.
That was probably the most bizarre place I can think of anyone has listened or kept in touch, unless, of course, our flock knows different, and I'm sure they probably do. Where's the most bizarre place you've listened or watched a Knots game from? Craig, let's discuss goalkeepers. I think it's fair to say, manager included or head coach included, that there's probably not a great deal of difference between Stone and Slocum. They've been rotated this season. Started off with Stone, Slocum came in, now Stone back in. What's your take on that? How important is that, if you like, commanding style goalkeeper to a promotion team? And I'd also throw in, which several of our flock have mentioned, Tiernan Brooks is back now. Played for Cork in the League of Ireland. Their season has finished, so he is now back, as many of us saw him in the warm-up on Saturday before the Walsall game. What's your take on the goalkeeping situation?
Yeah, I think it is a worry. I think they're very, Sam and Aidan are very close in terms of, you know, kind of standards, but I also think they're also, you know, similar in some of the kind of limitations as well. And I think I think Aidan came in. We obviously, you know, had high hopes, younger keeper, especially after the, you know, what we'd seen with Archie Mayer. And I know a lot of people are sort of harping. Actually, Archie's just around the corner from us in Gateshead, and but I do think it's a key role. It builds confidence at the back. I think, you know, the way we play, particularly alternating, passing it around, and the keeper being part of that, you know, sweeper keeper type of setup. Or, you know, the second thing is that we put it long and put it into the channels. You know, you need to do that with quality, and I think it's just been a bit erratic over the last few games, and you know, I think it's a difficult one when you bought a keeper in at the beginning of the season to then start fishing around in the market for another one in the January window. But I think, you know, Luke, one of the things I heard Luke saying in one of his commentaries a few weeks ago, which no one seemed to pick up on, but I thought was quite insightful, was that the one of his post-match interviews was around the fact that he doesn't have any emotional attachment to any of the players because of the recruitment model. He doesn't have much of a say in signing them, so he can be completely objective about who he plays. And I think he must, behind the scenes, speak to the, you know, the kind of recruitment staff and the training staff and express, I can only do with what you've given me, you know. And I'm sure that's something that we're looking at the moment, because we do seem vulnerable. We do, you know, and it's such a key position. You know, it's obvious. It's one, and Stal always says, doesn't he? Well, you know, as a keeper, you want one mistake and you could result in a goal, and you know, and so I think on Saturday, you know, looking at it objectively, when I watched it live, I thought the first one he was unlucky, but then I watched it back, I thought it was so really close to him. You know, it was savable. Second one, probably maybe less so, but yeah, again, don't like to criticize individuals, but you've got to say what you see, and I think there's a case for saying that we need something better in between the sticks. We need someone better.
Yeah, I think the goalkeeping situation is quite unusual. Normally, in a team that is very successful, your goalkeeper's normally near as damn it and ever present. Now, you've got the model at Arsenal, you know, with Arteta kind of saying he's got two goalkeepers vying for one slot. Not sure how much he genuinely believes that and is saying that as a presentation point of view. You know, the one I would throw out there, and clearly I've not seen him train, I've not seen him play at Cork. I wonder about Tiernan Brooks, and do, you know, is it conceivable you sling him in the way that you put James Sanderson in the FA Cup game, scores a goal, bloods him a little bit. I thought Tiernan didn't let us down at all last season. I think it's an option. It would be quite a brave option. You know, to your point, if I think it's a very big if you went for another goalkeeper in January, you're effectively relegating Tiernan Brooks to number 4, which basically means he ain't going to be playing at Notts County for a long time, in all probability. And sometimes you wonder, give him a chance, see what you think. Again, it's a high risk thing, but he is back from Cork. I know Notts and Tom will do rate Tiernan. Fans, I think, love to see young players coming through the ranks, and Tiernan's been kind of just knocking on that door for a little while now, and might be interesting. I suspect it wouldn't happen. I think he'll stick with Stone, but I'll throw that one out there to see what everybody thinks. Joe, on your Christmas card, in your Christmas present list, you're the owners at Notts County. How many players would you be additionally making available, i.e. supplementing the squad for Luke to dip into? Substantial numbers, small numbers, keep going with the small squad. Where would your head be at from the games that you've seen?
Well, I mean, it's certainly not quantity, it's quality. And I think that Luke Williams has before made a bit of a point of he's aware it's a small squad, and in a way that's kind of our selling point, because it means that players don't get too frustrated if they're just on the bench all the time, and they still get a chance to train with everyone. And whereas you've got teams with really big squads, then you don't get that same level of loyalty perhaps from the squad, and some of the backbenchers get a bit maybe discontent and wanting to move on, and so you don't have that sort of loyalty. So I don't think it's a problem having a small squad, as long as the quality is enough to make up for it. It's certainly about the quality, not quantity. So I would, we've got to think about budget as well. Luckily, that's not our job, so we can say what we like. We can say, bring in everyone, make a huge squad. But that's going to have knock-on effects. So I'm happy with a small squad, but I think the selection then has to be quite careful. We can't start bringing in a few players that don't end up doing much. There's been a few players brought in this season that had quite high hopes, and then we've not seen too much of. So, perhaps that needs looking at as really carefully who, and making sure that we make some wise choices there. But I like the small squad. It makes you feel like, as a fan, that you know them all, and it makes you feel quite connected with the team. Whereas a bigger squad feels less personal, and I think that's one of our sort of selling points as Notts, is we're almost part of the team as fans. So yeah, small squad. I quite like that, but carefully chosen.
Yeah, I'll go a bit philosophical and broader speaking. Stoke City sacked Alex Neil today. Something like 5 managers in the Championship, and they've not finished above 14th. It's something like that. One of my, I was going to say many, it's probably better to say few, friends in professional football is Tony Pulis. And Tony built Stoke up, got them into the top flight, got them into Europe, and then you start getting I know we were 9th, but we need to be progressing now. We need to be building on that. And so a few fans, Tony Pulis only plays hoofball. We're a one-trick pony with Tony Pulis. Blah, 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 blah. Stoke the owner decides to listen, to the masses, in inverted commas, who know best. They get rid of Tony Pulis. They give Mark Hughes a shed load to spend. Never finished any higher than Tony Pulis did. And then they got relegated. Then they spent more shed loads, got through a whole series of managers. And Tony Pulis now is the greatest manager Stoke have had in 100 years. And I think part of the reason people like Stoke, like Tony, are successful is there's a clear direction of the club. A clear strategy might not be the way everybody wants to play, but there's clarity. We've heard John Bostock talk about clarity, David McGoldrick talk about clarity of the style of play. And you just see a few little seeds, you've mentioned it, Craig, of, we're tippy-tappy too much, we do this, we do that. The reality is that got us out of the National League. That has got us into the playoff positions. And me, do I, as a newly turned 60-year-old, think, cool, we need to defend better? You know, I was brought up centre halves head the ball, all the rest of it. Do I say to mates around me during the game, I can't believe we don't win enough first balls in the box at either end? Why don't we put some more longer corners in? They're just personal views, okay, that we all vent in exasperation at times. But, you know, the reality is, Notts have more of an identity and a style that wins matches under Luke Williams than we have done probably for about 9 months under Kevin Nolan, where people again will be disparaging, but everybody knew their jobs. Before that, you have to really start winding the clock back. And you talk to any of the pros in promotion seasons, Neil Warnock's promotion era, Howard Wilkinson's promotion era for those of a certain age, and the players will all tell you they were kind of told what to do, when to do, how to do it. There were certain caveats and parallels, and I think under Luke the players are given autonomy on the pitch, but they play a certain way, which is why I think when we bring players in, it takes them so long to adapt. And so overall, we're in a great position. And so people that start talking about, we should play a 4. Oh, we need to oof the ball longer. Oh, we need to be more direct. I don't see that happening, because you're kind of throwing everything out with what's been successful. Clearly, there's going to be tweaks and modifications. But this style that we have, some of us will really like it. Some of us will think, we need to do a bit more. That's what's brought success. So you stick with that. You don't suddenly veer off and go into another direction. So I think it's small tweaks. I think it's going to be very interesting in terms of the recruitment model and the metrics that are applied. And that would fall very heavily on the shoulders of Richard Montague, who is kind of the brother's man at Meadow Lane on the football side. And clearly Luke has an input and an involvement in the recruitment of players, but fundamentally, as I understand the model, those players are identified by Richard, his team of analysts and the brothers, and a discussion ensues with the head coach. I think Flock, tell me what you think. I think the really interesting dynamic is, will there be any adapting of the metrics, particularly perhaps in defence, of what you are looking for in players? Because fundamentally, the prerequisite for all of our players appears to be an ability on the ball. There is possibly a weakness in our capability of defending at the minute. I wonder how much we may or may not tweak those metrics to the kind of players that we look to bring in. Be very interesting. Or does Luke pull more rabbits out of hats in adapting and moving people around and making us more difficult to score goals against? Thoughts, Craig?
Yeah, I agree. I think a couple of things. Actually, one thing you were saying there, a mate of mine's a Man City fan, and he sent me a podcast the other day, a Man City podcast, and in it there was a 2-minute snippet from Luke at the fans forum talking about his philosophy on corners. That was on a Man City podcast, and they were saying on there about, that justifies what Pep does. So they're using Luke Williams to justify what Pep Guardiola, and it's a similar philosophy. So I think he's an incredible. I've been fortunate enough to meet Luke at the sponsors day and talk to him, and I was asking him about his philosophy, and I work with a lot of people in leadership roles, and you can kind of see when people have got it and when they're kind of just winging it, and he's definitely, there's definite substance to the guy. I think he's amazing. So I think he will need to adapt. If you look at what happened with Bournemouth, as they did that meteoric rise that season we played them in, in the Munto era, and then they went on all the way, in a number of seasons, not one after the other. You look at what Eddie Howe did there. They changed the style they played every time they got promoted. They realized that they couldn't do what they'd been doing last season, and modified it, not threw the baby out with the bathwater, but adapted it to that level of football. And I think, Luke, I said earlier, our players are relatively inexperienced at this level. Luke said at the beginning of the season, I've never managed in League Two. I don't know what to expect. He's been assistant managers, obviously, at slightly higher levels, but so I think he is learning, and I think he does. We need to recognise that, but I think the club and the team need to adapt, and that does take a little bit of time. Look at Stockport; it's taking them 2 seasons to find their feet. We all thought we were in our wildest dreams after that first few games, after we got the Sutton out of our system, thought we were going to kind of fly through it, but reality bites. So I think we do need to adapt the way we play. But again, I hear a lot of talk about plan A, plan B. Where's plan B? Well, it's not going to be that massively different from plan A. It's just going to be around the margins. It's not going to be, we're going to start sticking it 80 yards up the pitch into the penalty area every time we get the ball. It's not going to be like that. It's just going to be small differences in the style we do it. And I think we just got, I think Walsall came into that game on Saturday thinking we've got nothing to lose here. So let's try completely throw them off balance by doing something they don't expect us to do. I spoke to one of their fans in hospitality afterwards. He was in there, with the county foundation, and he said, I know where that came from. We've not played like that all season. I've never seen us play that style of football all season. They've just rolled the dice, and we couldn't adapt to it in the moment. I genuinely think that's part of what happened on Saturday, among other things. We do need to adapt.
Yeah, Andy Eastham says, have to echo Joe's comments around squad size. I feel signings are imminent, but for the first time under Luke, we will have 2, 3, 4 players out of the match day squad. Chris Gosling, we don't need to change the way we play. We just need better players to execute the game plan. James Shipley, Luke won't change the game plan. We just need better quality players in certain areas to be able to execute it properly. Derek Flowers, the players that will sign in January, when will they be ready to put into the first team with the style of play we adopt? This is a very valid point, Derek. Other than players that come in the closed season and have a pre-season, it is a struggle to think of any player that we have signed during the season that has been put straight in to the team, with the requirements, fitness levels, what Luke is looking at for the players to do. We think of Johnny Bostock, who's been massively instrumental in us getting up the game at Wembley at the start this season. He was not straight into the team by any stretch of the imagination. And then Luke has spoken about the mental dilemmas that he went through with kind of saying to Jody Jones as well as John Bostock, look, guys, I know you've played at the top level. I know we're in the National League, but you're not quite ready to play week in, week out for me in the National League. And he's kind of having these like mental debates in his head about how to keep them incentivized, but needs to bed them in. So it's a difficult window, I think, for us to sign Notts County ready players that go into that team on January the 1st, January the 4th, or whatever. We were desperate to bring players in to supplement weak numbers in the middle of the park with Dan Gosling. Dan's not played professional football for the best part of a year. It's always going to be a massive ask for him to come in and then, he's played the Premier League, so he'll be fine. Takes time to adapt on these things. And I think more so with Notts. Ian G says, even in our current style, we certainly need to move the ball quicker at this level. Opponents currently have acres of time to regroup. Gary Lee says, agree on missing Palmer, but losing Kedwin was huge. He always put a shift in and epitomises everything we want in his attitude. I'm sure Macca is missing his co-scorer from the last 2 seasons. Martin Shipley, counter view. Let's face it, some of our recruitment hasn't been so good. We're questioning Stone's ability. Marias is finding it difficult, and Randall doesn't add anything to the squad. Look, I think when we recruitment, Martin, those in the game will tell you there's no such thing as perfect recruitment or terrible recruitment. If you sign 6 players and 3 are good, you're doing well. You know, the reality is you don't sign 6 players and all 6 become fulcrums of your team. So, I think our recruitment has been very consistent in the metrics and the things that we're looking at. But I do find it quite interesting as to whether we may or may not change any of those metrics going into the January window. We'll find out. Robert Smeaton, we absolutely have to stick to how we play, but just do it better and with a few tweaks, a few additions. We noticeably went more long on Saturday and it didn't work. Chris Gosling, it's easy to leave new players out when the team is winning. It's a fair point. If the run continues, the emphasis might change in respect of when players are ready to stay. Neil Walker, with a couple of good results, the fans will see it differently. 1 point behind second is not dire. Absolutely. Wins equals confidence. James Moore, outside the back three, we don't have any defensive-minded players on the pitch. Palmer in the holding role is such a key position, and we all know Matty's out for the season. Caput. Joe, you're like younger than me, fair bit younger than Craig. You've watched Notts largely in the nether regions of professional football. What for you is success this season? Because we all live in an instant world. We all dismissed, or we all said that Notts were playing League One football in the National League. We've got all these Galacticos of the lower divisions, right? And I think we can all safely agree the National League was not as good as we said it was while we were doing so well in it. And League Two overall is a heck of a lot better than we thought, because let's be perfectly honest, we ain't a mid-table League One club, right? So what come end of April, May, what will you be happy and content with?
I think from where we were after the first sort of few matches, I think it's easy to have very high expectations. Flying high in the sort of the floating around first and second was quite unbelievable, really. But that became the norm, and I think, it's easy now to be critical. Now we're having a bit of a lull, and I think it's easy for people to jump on the bandwagon and criticise and sort of catastrophise. But actually, we have to take a bit of a step back and think about where we've come from. It's also easy to compare to the likes of Wrexham and where they are and their trajectory. But we are inherently different clubs. We come from different starting points. We've got different models, structures, money, fan base, owners. And I think, progress doesn't happen like this on an upward trajectory. Progress happens like this. You can't see wobbly like that, and it's going to be up and then down and a bit more up and then down. I think we need a bit of perspective and a bit of balance. And I agree, Craig, I think we need just tweaking. We don't think we need to jump to knee-jerk kind of drastic changes. So I think, clubs are evolving. They're always going to be changing. And I think ultimately the end of the season, we've got to be positive if we are in and around the playoff zones. I think if you asked me that on that rainy Sutton afternoon that I dragged my poor colleague to come and see, oh, you won't believe how we're playing at the moment, and then dragged into Sutton. And then after that, if you asked me, and if you told me then, would you be happy with a playoff spot at Christmas time, I'd bite your arm off for it. And I think many people would. So I think success is going to be keeping our integrity as a club. I think that's really, really important when, not just the players and how our style of play and training, staying true to ourselves, but the integrity of our fans and our loyalty as fans. I think that will be success. I think it'll be success if we're still playing exciting, progressive football. We've got a lot to be excited about. We've got arguably the strongest front three in the league potentially. I know I'm biased, but I genuinely think as a trio they don't come much stronger than that with where we are. I think we've got a manager that everyone is envious of. We've got loyal owners. I think we've got a lot to be excited about, and I think success is going to be if we are continuing that upward trajectory, even if it's not an idealistic, where we thought we might be a few games ago. I think ultimately we've got a lot to be positive about. And yeah, if we were in and around the playoffs, then if you asked us that at the end of last season or at the start of this season, we'd be absolutely delighted. And I think I still will be.
That's very good. That's very good. Let's get some comments. No, you've enunciated it well. Let's get some thoughts. We all know we are heading for a playoff final against Wrexham. It's in the Hollywood script, says Ian G. Can we talk about how brilliant Magpie is for his age, says Jake. Since he started playing, I think he's only lost possession once. It might be a few more times than that, but I know a lot of Notts fans do kind of think he could perhaps get a bit more game time, but it's only one person's opinion that counts. James Shipley, my expectations have risen as I've seen the season go on. I started by being happy if we stay in the league. But with how we've started post Sutton, my hope of another promotion have been increased. Duncan Conway says, I think Toby Adebayo-Rowling should replace Naman. Shane Walker, wherever we end up, we'll still be here next season and the season after. Chris Gosling, we're averaging, here we go, 1.71 points per game. As a bare minimum, we don't want to see that get any lower. I think my take on this would be, I think it is realistic for us to be challenging for the playoffs. And I think that would be brilliant. I said at the start of the season with Stell on one of the first shows, I said, if anywhere near the playoffs, getting a playoff, I think we have done really, really well. Top three, we are 1 point off it. So, and people go on about Stockport a lot, and they've done brilliantly well. But is it the last 2 or 3 games they've not won? So I don't think anyone, and if you look where Chesterfield are in the league this year, in the National League, the steamrolling it. You picked up on it, Craig. Walsall, if you just look at a league table, not doing particularly well, bottom 8 or 9 team. Let's be perfectly honest, were full value to beat us on Saturday, and on any given weekend, the team at the bottom of the table can challenge, beat, draw against anyone in this division, as Stockport have just found out quite recently after having gone on a remarkable run. I mean, same question, Craig. What to you would you be happy with? What's a realistic aspiration for us this season?
Yeah, I'm like you. I think it's like, you don't want to say it would feel like a failure if we're not in the playoffs, but I think it would be mildly disappointing if we didn't make the playoffs after the, certainly the first third of the season that we had. But again, going back to the beginning of the season, I mean, I never thought we'd be fighting, down the bottom, but I thought mid-table,
not even after Sutton, not quarter past 5 Saturday, August, or whatever it was. I was a bit concerned, if I'm honest with you.
Flying down from Newcastle, hiring a car, which took me longer to drive from Heathrow to Sutton than it did to fly from Newcastle, then going all the way back. I mean,
is that what you did? I knew you'd flown down. You did hire a car then to get from?
Hired a car, and then my seat was on the front row, so all the water was just running off the stand into my lap. I tried to go in the standing area, and there was no room in there, so I just sat there and just bedraggled, and it was just like. I know the funny thing is like the last game had been at Wembley, and then you think we're promoted now, and then you go back to Sutton. It's like we're back in the National League, and it's chucking it down with rain, and we're losing miserably. But no, so yeah, I mean, after that, yeah, but I don't know. You say we could see it was a one-off, but it was probably what we needed. It was a good slap round the face, wasn't it? And then we responded to that, and I think we've just kind of now become maybe a little bit. Bit not complacent, but we're trying to, maybe we do need another slap round the face, and we're getting it. But I do think playoffs, if we end up missing out on playoffs by 3 points, and think of the games we've endured over the last few weeks, and are likely to endure probably others, that you think we could have had that. We could have, like Wimbledon. I wasn't there, but listening to it on the radio, I know you kind of think. was it there for at least a draw? You know, Saturday, could we have just shut up shop and won 1-0 on Saturday, like Luke said in his interview? I don't know. I just hope we don't come to rue those. But, you know, I think we will. I like Joe said, I think for me, the bigger picture, excuse the pun, is when you look at where we're at and where we're going, it's the first time I mean, even in the Warnock era with Pavis, it was all, you know, it still felt hand to mouth. We were doing well, and we had those amazing seasons. But now it feels like we've got a plan. Everything is being done in strategically. We may not always agree with it. It might not always work, but we've got a plan, and it's not just hire and firing managers left, right, and centre, bringing in players that then don't fit in with the new manager's philosophy. You know, we've got a structure which I can't, you know, I'm going back to the Jimmy Cyril era. You know, there were amazing days, but it was always a bit wafer thin. You know, one of those links broke in the chain, like Jimmy leaves, or, you know, you lose a player like Draper or Johnson, and, you know, there were key elements of that. Whereas I think now it's a foundation that we can build on, and it's not always going to go right. We're going to have good days, bad weekends, bad runs, but I do think the overall path that we're on is more. I've got more optimism now than I've ever had as a Notts fan in 40 odd years of following them. So I don't know whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, whether I'm deluded or whether I'm realistic. I don't know.
Jürgen Halligan says, top 10 finish I'd be happy with. James Moore, I still think top 3 should be our aim. The playoffs as a minimum. We are good enough, but this defensive blip needs to be rectified ASAP. Neil Walker, as for Wrexham top 3, for Wrexham top 3 a must, as our playoff form is not too good. Graham Monteith, recent results and performances are disappointing, but I always think back to the first Reitz brothers interview. Our club is on the up, and if you progress sustainably, it is likely to be slow. Chris Gosling, our recent our record against the current top 7 is 4. And that's why I think top 3 is beyond us, but top 7 is a realistic aim. Before we wrap up tonight, Harrogate. Harrogate. So we're going there on Saturday. First, what were you doing, Joe? Where were you watching that debacle in the playoff final a few years ago?
A few years ago, I was actually in, I think, Vietnam.
You get about a bit, don't you? The Senegalese desert. And then you're in Vietnam. God, I've travelled a bit. I've never been in either of them 2 places. Did it look as bad in Vietnam as it did on our big TV screen in Nottingham? Or was you only listening to it?
Yeah. Maybe it doesn't sort of hit home quite so much, but it was it was one of those surreal sort of moments where you're like, I don't know who else around me is feeling this as well, but it was I think that's where I was. Yeah, so we've got some revenge, haven't we, to pay for?
Unfinished business. And I think you've read the book, Mr. Smith. Your dad probably has, or has he got it for his Christmas present? One of the most revealing things in it was in the Neil Ardley interview, was he said he felt supremely confident, really good position, could beat anyone, until an hour before kickoff at Wembley, when they run out and they do the warm-up. And he said, I was worried. They were flat. They couldn't trap a bag of cement. Whatever it was had got to them. And he said, I was faced with a dilemma of, do I front them up 10 minutes before kickoff and get into them, or do I not? Because that might make the situation even worse. And when I spoke to Jim O'Brien for the book, Jim also said, and Sam, whatever it was, they were not in the right frame of mind just before kickoff, and that manifested itself incredibly quickly. And it is so interesting the way we're now back in the league, Craig. wonderful, wonderful way. You couldn't script it any better against Chesterfield. But that sojourn, for want of a better phrase, in the National League could have just been 12 months. We're back in, just like that.
No, I know. I remember after we lost the Coventry game, I was in the Cop, and I turned around to this lad who was absolutely distraught, and I said, believe you me, things happen for a reason. You'll look back at this moment and you'll think actually it was the right thing to have happened. And I remember that. I can't remember the specific occasion, but I remember that at various times in my not supporting career. And I think had we gone up that season, Ardley would have taken us into this League Two, and we'd have all been delighted that we'd bounced straight back. But you just wonder whether it would have been a different path that the one that we've followed now, and whether we would have come straight down again or whether we'd have gone on. So I do think, life's full of those interesting branches in the road. And I do think that moment when we lost to Coventry, the moment we lost to Harrogate, all hideous games. And you're asking how I watched it. I was watching it on me big telly because it was in the middle of COVID, wasn't it? I had my stream cam set up with my dad still in Nottingham, turned around so he could watch it because he didn't have, I shouldn't be saying this, I'll probably get prosecuted, but he was watching it from Nottingham through a webcam, streaming it like this. Another mate who was watching it as well because he didn't have BT Sport. So it was it was horrible. But as I said to you before we started recording, it's my one and only home game this season for Notts. I lost Gateshead, then Hartlepool got relegated, Carlisle got promoted. So Harrogate is the nearest game for us this season. And unfortunately, I couldn't get my dad a seat. So I could only get standing seats. So unfortunately, he can't come with us because he can't stand for 90 minutes. So I'm going with a friend who also lives in Newcastle, another Notts supporter up here. So there's 4 of us actually in Newcastle, 4 Notts supporters who I've managed to pin down. And Colin, obviously, who's a sort of a temporary second team Notts supporter who I know as well, Kedwin's dad.
Yeah, not sure where the rest of our flock were watching that game from. I remember it. I was sat in the living room, got the big screen telly, and I was watching it on my own. My son was in the garage, and I'm not sure whether he was on his own or whether some people might have just come in off the street and happened to watch the game with him, which would obviously not been permissible. But I have no idea. But yeah, I mean, it was so incredibly frustrating to watch Harrogate really steamroller us. And then there was just that, they teased us a little bit, didn't they, with Kel Roberts and the free kick. But, I didn't think we were ever really in it. And that's really why I was banging on ahead of Chesterfield last season about making sure we wore black and white striped shirts, because we spoke with James Belshaw on one of the podcasts, massive Notts fan. His dad's always watching this, big Notts family, released by Notts at an early age. And he said it genuinely made a difference to him when he saw Notts playing in bottle green. This one here, I think, wasn't it? He said psychologically it would have made it just that 0.5% more difficult for him as a born and bred, raised Notts fan. You associate Notts with black and white, and it just took a little bit of an edge off. So when I'd heard Notts might, because obviously Notts didn't need to change kit, I don't think that day, or they could have just changed the shorts or something. And I was like mortified that Notts might be playing in lavender at Wembley, so I kind of mobilised a few things. I needn't to worry because Notts want to wear black and white, but I just had this morbid fear that we might be in lavender, and we've only ever won at Wembley in black and white. We've always lost when we played in the away kit. So, but look, as you say, these things are meant to happen, I guess, sliding doors moments. And we're back in the Football League where we belong. Hang on, I'm just going to see whether the police are raiding me. Chris Gosling, the Mace household breaking the rules. Would that be called Harrogate Gate when it comes up in the COVID inquiry? Well, look, to the best of my knowledge, my son was on his own in the garage. I have no further knowledge or recollection of that, and no WhatsApp messages whatsoever that I have destroyed that would contradict that. Okay, my lord. Andy Adcock. The players we have cannot complement our system at this level. And more worryingly, Luke Williams seems to have no plan B. Well, there you go. It's all about alternative views. I'm not sure I would agree with that, but anyone. Jurgen says he was watching it on his big screen TV. Shane Walker from behind the sofa. It's like watching Doctor Who when you were about 8 years old and you were scared of the Daleks, wasn't it? That performance. Elkazar 35. Your dad is corroborating this, Craig. I'm not allowed to go to Harrogate. Could only get standing tickets, and they were out in the open. Well, you just kind of like mentioned that one. Les Swanwick, it's baffling that even though it took 5, I think it was 4, feels like 44, to get out of the National League, some fans expect to get out of League 2 in 1. I think that kind of comes down to that whole patience expectationally, and that's part and parcel, I guess, of being a football fan. But hopefully the analogy with Stoke and Tony Pulis, the grass is not always greener, and you have to take your time a little bit. Right, we've done an hour. I think that probably just about wraps things up. Joe, thank you so much for joining us. Well, we obviously know you're a globetrotter. No one in our flock could match keep in touch with Notts from the Senegalese desert, or even for that matter, watching or listening to Notts versus Harrogate in Vietnam. So thank you so much for joining us. Hope you've enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me on. Thank you.
No, it's always good to get a balanced view from different generations and all the rest of it, not just geriatric like me, as a take. Craig, thank you very much. We'll let you go back to playing with your Star Wars figurines now. Okay, is that all right?
Yeah, that's fine. Thanks, Paul. Thanks for everything you do as well. By the way, I've said this a few seasons ago. I've never felt as connected to Notts, living 180 odd miles away as I have, and your podcast's a massive part of that. So thank you.
That's very kind of you to say.
I'd echo that. Yeah, I'd echo that. Being a distant fan, it's these sorts of things that make you feel even more connected. So
Well, I'm just very fortunate. I have a media background. I've worked in pro football. I'm just a conduit, and I'm just fortunate that I have time, capability, and all the rest of it. Jurgen's come back fighting. Jurgen used to be in the RAF. I listened to Notts when I was in the RAF from the Falklands. Well, there you go. I don't think it's physically possible to watch Notts or follow Notts from a further point on the planet than the Falklands, unless I don't know, there's some satellite station on the North Pole or the South Pole. So, but yeah, no, Jurgen's a proper fan. I know that. So, well done, Jurgen. And some more nice things from various people. Andy Adcock regularly tunes in from Cyprus. It does never cease to amaze me how even a club the size of Notts attracts a fan base, and all clubs are the same, from just so many disparate parts and corners from all over the world. So hopefully, don't forget, because we've sold out for Harrogate, we've sold out for Stockport. I've got my tickets. I'll keep an eye out for you all. Thank you very much indeed. We've got a plan, we've got a process. Hopefully there'll be a few reinforcements handed over to Luke on January the 1st. Keep the faith, as they say, and we're in a good place. Thank you very much indeed. Look forward to catching up with you all again soon. Cheers for now. Bye-bye.